Network. I'm your host, Dan Dickau. This is a fun one for me. I know I've had some really good guests and really good guests, but today's is different. It's special. It's unique for a couple of reasons. He was an AAU teammate of mine back in high school. We split ways. He became a cornerstone of Gonzaga in their first initial Elite Eight run, maybe the biggest bucket in Gonzaga history, the tip-in against Florida that I'm sure we will talk about. Gonzaga legend Casey Calvary. Casey, we live in Spokane now. We don't see each other as much even as we did back in high school days when we lived apart in Vancouver and Tacoma and we were playing AAU, but it's always good to see you. You're actually taking a break from skiing to have this conversation. How in the heck does a 6'8" athletic guy get on skis?
It's easy, being big doesn't make it any harder to ski. But yeah, definitely taking a break here in Whitefish, meeting some buddies and skiing, having a fantastic time, just getting out and enjoying nature. So it's good to see you, Dan. We are a little busier these days, chasing families and kids and pursuing careers, but it's always good when we get back together, catch up and talk Zags hoops.
I mentioned our AAU days back together. That's before it was even like AAU days. We called it BCI. We had John Pillars as our head coach on that kind of travel team circuit. And I always loved playing with you because you played unbelievably hard. You played with a passion. You played with a team-first concept, and you translated that over to Gonzaga and had an unbelievable career. What was it about Gonzaga during that recruiting process that sold you? Because everybody thinks of Gonzaga as what they are now, the number one ranked team in the country, but you saw something in them before they became truly Gonzaga.
Yeah, there's a lot to that in the recruiting process, but first of all, thank you for the compliment, Dan. I enjoyed playing with you too. I think we did a good job of complimenting each other, and your threats from the outside. I'd try and get you open on a screen, and if they jumped out, you'd throw a lob. If they didn't jump out, shoot a three. It's simple basketball, right? What I liked about Gonzaga when I went there was, first of all, was the coaches during the recruiting process, the way they approached it. They were very down to earth, and they were very like, hey, here's what we've got. Our program, it's based upon the guys. You need to come play with our guys. I said, go take recruiting trips, anywhere you want to go. But I think if you come play with the guys we have on campus here, you'll see what we're building and you'll see what the future is like for Gonzaga. So as the recruiting process went along, I sort of started to narrow it down based upon the geography and the basketball success and the opportunity that I would have early in my career. Just because sitting out was never an option. I didn't want to redshirt. That's just not the way my personality is. I'm way too ADHD to sit out and do that. That wouldn't have been good for me. So during that process, they really laid it out like, hey, come on campus, see what the guys are like. I took my recruiting trip there. Took another one to Colorado State. Those were really my two final choices. And the big difference there was the guys. I had Matt Santangelo was there, Richie Fromm was already there. Mark Spink was there. Uxel, who else was there? Mike Nielsen, Ryan Floyd. The guys that they had there seemed like they didn't really belong at a program that was like Gonzaga at the time. I looked at the way that they could play basketball, the type of athletes they were. I mean, we had guys that were really dunking the ball and getting up and down court and pushing it. And that was things you saw at like bigger schools. So the opportunity was very exciting. So it had the right mix of like opportunity to play a lot early in my career and talent that it looked like we could do something with later.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with you. The talent level with Santangelo and Fromm in particular, not to downplay those other guys you mentioned, but those guys were household names in the Northwest. And had they not been in the Northwest, if they were LA guys or if they were, in bigger markets, they would have been recruited by a lot bigger programs such as yourself. It would have been the same. You get on campus, you start, obviously, Dan Monson, you had mentioned off camera or before we began recording, you were his first recruit. So you committed to Dan Monson, and that Elite Eight run was under Dan Monson. Now, I want to get to that in a minute, but Coach Few is a future Hall of Famer. and rightfully so. He's done an amazing job. We all love Coach Few. We all know, kind of his interesting viewpoints on different things and kind of his take on how he teaches the game. But when you were recruited by Monson as the lead, but also Few as an assistant, was there something about Coach Few that made you think like, hey, this guy's a tremendous coach? I believe in his message as well as Dan Monson's.
Yeah, absolutely. When they ask you to do something, it's never because, it's going to be best for Gonzaga or easier in the short term. So, the things that they asked me to do, in terms of improving my post moves and flexibility and all that sort of stuff, was it was like little steps. They build that trust when they're like, okay, why don't you try and work on this? And for me, like I'm not the easiest person to coach in the world. And I see it in my children now too, because the first time you tell me something, I just want to tell you no matter who you are, and it's just something contrary about me, and so it makes me difficult to coach. But they would, back it up with success that would come on the court with the methods that they were teaching me later on, and for me, that really fed my desire to have success on the court. So it was the way they figured out how to work with my personality and my particular quirks really, I think, is what sets them apart as coaches, because they didn't just do that with me. Fury did that with a lot of different players over the years, and he gets the most out of guys.
You mentioned you were difficult to coach. I never found you difficult to play with, because both in AAU and then once I transferred to Gonzaga from UW, we had the same like laser focus. Like, we both want to win. There's a night you might score more than I might and vice versa, but we had the same focus. But you had a focus that came out in your stare and in your glare. And I'm sure you've had other guys talk to you or mention this to you. When Casey Calvary gave you a stare down as an opponent, you were in for trouble. Has that always been the case?
It's a competition thing, and this is something that's been interesting for me to watch come out in my children as well. When you're competing, it does some crazy things to me, and I will do some really terrible things to win, no matter what that competition is and how pointless it might be. I've had to, limit myself later in life and be careful, like competing with my friends and like making golf bets and that sort of stuff. Because if I lose, I'll hate you for a little while. And I can't help it. You know what I mean? So I've had to learn to manage that over the years. Certainly playing with that, I would call it like gleeful rage or adrenaline, makes basketball super fun for me. I always liked that part of it. But yeah, I definitely have to be careful how I arrange myself in competition in normal life, because if I get real upset and real emotional about something, it takes me hours to calm down, and I'm not fit to be around other humans, so I go isolate.
So, that's really funny, and that's interesting, because I get the question a lot, since I obviously I've been done playing for 12 years or so now. Like, how do you fill that void of competitiveness? I didn't play for the longest time pickup because it was like, and not to sound bad, but like, I don't want to go play at the YMCA and have some guy take it as a challenge and undercut me. And I'm sure
Yes.
You were very similar. How do you and where do you find your competitive challenges these days?
Spokane Club, that's a place where I can go play with the guys. We play on traveling teams. Nobody's going to hurt you. That's where all the ex-college guys in Spokane play. We go scrimmage the local universities, when there's not COVID. And the camaraderie that we have there, and that, some of the guys that I've collected there, be it Mark Axton, Justin Bright, Mike Hart plays with me there now. Lots of Brian Bailey, lots of good guys that come. Lou Hurd, they come out, they play real hard. They're from all of their schools, but they're not going to hurt you. And, when we get together, we can compete, and then afterwards we can call it a day and move on from there. So I think it's pretty unique what I've found with those guys and in this area, to be able to do that and do it at a high level and still have fun, as I'm getting old.
Yeah, I hate the fact that you said we're getting old, because, it's true. Your tip-in, which is one of the most iconic, if not the most iconic play in Gonzaga history, if you can believe it, it's almost 20 years old now, or it is 20 years old. Yeah. And if we can kind of rewind back to that day, that play, that game, Was there messages in that in the different timeouts kind of leading up to the end of the game where you can remember back? Was Coach Few and Coach Monson saying, hey, crash the glass, we got to get to the glass? Or what was your thought process when Quentin Hall penetrated on that possession?
The timeout before that, I was sure Matt or Q was going to take that shot, or possibly Richie, but I couldn't see Quentin or Matt passing it up once they had it. Those guys were great finishers. They loved the moment. Both of them wanted that, So I figured whichever one of them had the ball, I better get to crashing the glass. And Munson actually gave specific instructions, like get the rebound or get a foul trying to get it. Don't waste any time. So for me, I was just like, all right, well, I'm going in hard.
Well, you mentioned either Quentin or Matt was going to shoot it, and you felt that same way. Fast forward 2 years, and it's my junior year, your senior year, first round of the NCAA tournament. It's the same thing. I was not going to pass the ball against Virginia. You didn't get a tip in like with 3 seconds, but you got a rebound, and you put back with about 8 seconds. So you've got 2 of maybe the 3 most iconic shots in GU history. That and the game Jordan Matthews hit to get Gonzaga the first Final Four. You look at those memories, NCAA tournament, both your sophomore year where you had the tip against Florida and then the junior year and your senior year. Everyone thinks Elite Eight was probably the one that stands out. And it may be, but is there another memory or an experience in that 3-year stretch of NCAA tournament games that stands out?
We first won the West Coast Conference tournament, and we were heading to our first NCAA tournament. That was a big goal accomplished in my life and in Gonzaga basketball history. Right, it was our second trip ever, and we were on the floor. Even though we had won league, we had to go win it. On some California school's floor, and I think we were.
Yeah, they never made it fair, did they?
They never made it fair. It was an uphill battle, right? Bunch of savages. But I remember we won that game. I think Santangelo had a huge game that day. And I remember my father made it out with all the Gonzaga fans. And, I had my arms wrapped around my dad, and we were just surrounded by Gonzaga people, on the enemy's floor celebrating an NCAA tournament bid. That's one of the most sweet moments to me. I mean, the Florida tip-in was amazing. When we got to continue senior year after Virginia, we didn't have to go home right away. I mean, that was fantastic. But just that first moment, sharing it with my dad, knowing that we had accomplished the first step of what we had set out to do at Gonzaga, that was remarkable for me. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, that's tremendous. You mentioned your dad. And we talked about your competitive spirit and that kind of stare down that you have. Is he who you got your competitiveness from, or where did you get that?
I think both my parents. My dad went to Idaho State, and he was a track and basketball guy. Just finished doing only track. But my mom is an unbelievable athlete and a fantastic competitor, and quite the alpha, and seems to dominate situations. So my mother has that as well. I don't know what combination of that gave me the gift and the curse of competition being what it is to me and to my family, but it's in there somewhere. So
you played after Gonzaga, you played 7-8 years professionally all over the world. You played in the CBA, which is now the G League. You played in Australia, you played Japan, France, Spain, some really good leagues. I had Coach Few on my other podcast called The ISO, and he has said, not just to me on that, but on other occasions that I've heard him, he has said that you're the one Gonzaga player that he feels the NBA missed on. Is that a prideful thing? Does that give you a lot of pride in hearing that comment? Does that give you frustration that the NBA didn't give you a full look, or what does that make you think?
Well, certainly I was frustrated at the time, just because, I didn't get invited to Chicago draft camp, and I felt like with the career that I had, I at least deserved to get a run at it, but the NBA wasn't really shopping for stretch fours, who block shots and run the floor. It's like everything they're looking for now, right? It's great. But back then, you needed to be 6'11" to be a 4 in the NBA. So I really appreciate, Coach Few saying that, and feeling like I would have been successful at that level. I feel like if I would have got a shot and could have got out there and could have competed, then I, could have competed at that level based upon my friends who did go on and play at that level. But at the same time, it taught me a lot of things. Being rejected by the NBA, it makes you figure out like, okay, I'm not going to be able to like feed my family the rest of my life with basketball and with my athleticism, like maybe my expectation was a couple of years ago early in life. And so I have to do it with my mind, and I have to do it in business. So, would I change things and be able to go back and get drafted and play in the NBA? Yes, for sure. I would. Everybody would do that. But having, been rejected and taking that alternate route, it taught me things in business and made me hungry and made me value my money and reinvest it and made me into what I am today, which is, a happy person and a good businessman and a good father.
Tremendous answer. And I'm right there with Coach Few. I mean, because, and I say this because not only are we friends, but we were teammates from high school, and I saw your development when I went to UW and you were at Gonzaga, and I was like, holy cow, he's exponentially getting better, as was Richie, as was Matt Santangelo. I was jealous. I wanted to be a part of that exponential individual development as well as being a part of a up-and-coming program. And that's where I decided to make the change. And I loved having you as a teammate. I loved seeing that trajectory. I loved that answer. What do you see in this year's Gonzaga team? Because I know there's so many guys that live in Spokane now. This year, unfortunately, we don't get a chance to see each other before and after games at the McCarthy Athletic Center and kind of throw our 2 cents in there, in passing. What do you see from this year's team?
I see poetry in motion with these boys. I mean, the way they share the basketball, they know they're going to get it back. The simple things that you try and teach in coaching, like setting a good screen and then cutting hard to the basket or setting your guy up for a good back cut, running hard every time on the break, getting the ball out quick. I mean, like all the little stuff that you try and teach in basketball, they're proficient at. And what they end up getting is a ton of easy buckets. It's layups, dunks, wide open threes, shots where they're contesting and then they're getting really easy, high percentage of looks on the other end. So I haven't seen the offense run that smoothly. I feel like since, my group was there, and since you and I were playing together, when we used to really, we needed to, but we used to execute really well. We knew what other teams' weaknesses were, and we knew how to attack them offensively. The difference that I'm seeing, I think, with this particular team is they can do that. They can defend at a higher level because they're larger and longer and more athletic in a lot of positions compared to how we were. And they go a whole nother road deep than we used to. So when you combine all of those things together in one team, it's like, who are you going to stop? You make Suggs have a bad night. We have so many other guys that can come out, and hurt you. Watching, Timmy develop in the post and put up numbers like he has. You can take our top 2 or 3 scorers and shut them down, and we can bring in guys off the bench who can nail you. So it's a very unique and difficult team to prepare for and to guard.
Poetry in motion. That's a perfect description of their offense. Because yes, they just flow into offense. There's so many like stretches of the game where Coach Few doesn't call anything. He just lets guys play, and they play so well off of each other. One of the kind of hallmark things of Gonzaga's program has always been leadership from upperclassmen. And you learned it from Matt Santangelo and Richie Fromm, and then guys like myself and Alex Hernandez, Anthony Reason learned it from you and Mark Spink. And it's just kept going over the years. Corey Kisper's doing a tremendous job of it now. There was an experience. It would have been my junior year, your senior year. It would have been the 2000-2001 season. And we were in a bit of a funk. We lost in Florida, and then we went to, of all places, Wisconsin, Green Bay. And I want to ask you if you remember that.
Dreams go to die.
So we go from Florida, beautiful weather. We go tour the Everglades as a team, see alligators, whatnot. We lost.
Yep.
Good team. We go to Wisconsin, Green Bay. And we had just beaten this team by like 50, like in Spokane about 3 weeks prior. And they put a hurting on us. And the reason I make this comment is because of the leadership angle that I want. Do you remember the message that Mark Spink made in that locker room after the game and that you kind of seconded to right the ship? Because I think that was an instrumental moment in Coach Few's coaching career as well as the Gonzaga program, if I'm not mistaken. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think we came together as a team, and if you lose a game like that where, it's dark, you're playing in an aircraft hangar, there's a lot of angry Wisconsin people threatening you with dairy products. I mean, you just don't know what's going on. And you have to have effort, and so if you're going to lose in a terrible gym like that in the middle of nowhere, you better give it 100% because there's nothing else. No one's going to come in and save you. You're not going to get a friendly referee call. There's no one on your side in those places. And we were missing some of that effort. And I think, Spink, he didn't really love to practice or love to be in the gym, but that guy was a competitor and he went hard every time. And that's what he asked everybody else to do, and when we changed sort of a couple of things around and just our approach to how hard we were going every play, then we started seeing those things. And of course you were hurt. I mean, that really, that affects us to have a player of your caliber be hurt. And Blake was stepping up, amazingly for as young as he was, but we had some struggles. So I remember we had a conversation after that game. Mark Spink and I were out and about, and we ended up talking with Mark Few and Billy Greer, and the conversation was just like, where are we and are we all right? And we just told him, look, we're going to be fine. We've been banged up. Florida was tough. I don't know why you sent us here to Wisconsin. We're fine. We'll go home and, we'll start winning games and it'll be fine. Just basically told him not to worry. And I think he felt comfortable after that. Just, if we were going to go out from that point in time and lose a lot of games, we were at least going to play really, really hard from then on out. And once you have that feeling, that takes a lot of pressure off because, you're going to give it 100% and your guys will too.
Yeah, I think we ended up ripping off 21 of 22 games in the win column after that. And so the message that Mark and Spink and you came with in the locker room after that game and then set the tone for was exactly what we needed. And then guys have carried it on ever since. And I think the beautiful thing about Gonzaga's program is we look to the older guys to lead, and then we follow and add our own spin, and it keeps growing to be what it is now. I know I've taken a lot of your time, Casey, but I got a couple really quick hitting questions because I know you probably you probably caught a couple beers and you want to get back out on the night skiing in Whitefish because it's such a great area. But you got a couple more minutes?
I do. I've got I was curious. I had a question for you too. Yeah. Just when you were at UW, you got a chance to play with those guys and to play in their coaching staff. And then you got the opportunity to transfer somewhere new and learn a new system and play with a different group of guys. So sort of similar to the questions that you were asking me, what was the difference that you felt like when you were on the court with us and our guys and playing for Mark and those guys compared to the feelings that you had before? How was it different?
Yeah, no, that's tremendous insight because I think the true answer is when I was at UW, it almost felt like there were 5 guys with different purposes out there. Very talented guys, but they were going in different areas. And what I saw at Gonzaga, it made me want to transfer. Granted, I had a friendship with you. I had a friendship with Richie Fromm from growing up. I had a friendship with Zach Gord, who I was high school teammates with. But I saw each of those guys getting as good as they could individually, but then taking the best strengths of their game and the coaching staff molding it to create a great team. And within that, each guy had the same singular end purpose goal, and that was to win a game and to be the best team that they could be. And that's what I didn't see at UW at the time. And that's where, I know you and I had talked a couple times my sophomore year when I was at UW and I was kind of struggling with staying there. And I talked to Richie all the time and I talked to Zach Gord occasionally. That's what I was missing. That's what I wanted to be a part of. And that's what was so special about GU. And I think that's continued to carry on. You see a guy gradually get better over the 4 years and maximize his potential, but he continues to fit within a team structure, and that team structure maximizes their group potential every year. It's amazing.
It is.
It is. So a couple quick hitting questions here. Who's the toughest teammate you've ever played with?
That's an interesting question.
Because there's lots of them. I mean, because you were with that Elite Eight team, and they were toughness in different ways.
Yeah, I think Quentin Hall is the answer to that question.
Interesting. Why would that be?
Because he wasn't afraid of anybody ever, no matter how hurt he was going to play. The moment was never too big. There was no fear. I mean, everything that toughness was, that guy had, from learning how to play basketball bare feet, in the Bahamas, on the street, to, his upbringing with his brothers, and to making it to YVCC with Leon, to ending up at Gonzaga and being a star and making a professional career out of it. It was all so unlikely and took so much work and so much toughness. So I admire Q, I think.
Best shooter that you played with at Gonzaga?
That's you and Richie and Blake right behind. So, yeah, give me a coin toss on that.
Yeah, I'll give you that's a hard one.
I'll give you a coin toss on that with Blake right behind.
How about best defender that you played with? I know it's not me, that's for sure.
I would probably say that I played with.
Yeah, that you played with.
Boy, I played with two really legendary ones. I would probably say Mark Spink, just because, I mean, he could truly guard like 1 through 5. Not many guys, like back then, there's not many guys that could do that. Mike Nielsen was along that same caliber, but just had a little bit less size and couldn't really do a 5 quite as good as maybe Spink could. So I'm going to give him the nod there.
Okay. Now, I mentioned you had one of the most iconic plays in Gonzaga history with the tip-in. You also had an iconic play in the fact that you broke a backboard in a game. With all of the changes in the NCAA, and I know you're outspoken with different things, but all the changes in the NCAA, how much money could you have made off of Gonzaga after breaking a backboard in a game?
I don't know. That would have to be somebody who could figure out, how to make that press into dollars. I mean, Gonzaga swept up the glass and sold it. So these days, you might be able to get a piece of that since, my name was on it and I signed them. Difficult to say how you could have capitalized on it. There's definitely probably some social media stuff that could have been done at the time. I don't know anything about that now, but I think there's definitely ways that athletes can capitalize on the things that they're doing at their universities, for sure.
Well, Casey, I really appreciate the time. As I mentioned, you are one of my favorite teammates of all time, whether it was growing up in AAU to playing together at Gonzaga. You've had a couple of the most iconic moments in GU history. You're an absolute Gonzaga legend, and if this team continues to develop the way that we all think they can, and they have that competitive streak and that competitive nature that you have, I think the season's going to end up the way that we all hope it does. So, Casey, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me on, Dan. I love you, brother.
All right, take care. And ski well, because I know one thing that's true. I'm awful on the slopes, that's for sure.
All right, bud.